Fighting games. A competitive pastime that allows players to test their skills with others with the same interest. Within the fighting game community, enthusiasts often stand out as being some of the most passionate gamers. And yet despite all of that, when it comes to being recognized as a Game of the Year contender, most scoff at the idea of a fighting game being among one of the best games to release in any year. With the Game Awards 2023 releasing in just a couple days, I wanted to know what it would take for a fighting game to win the Game of the Year award. Today, we will be dissecting exactly what other Game of the Year winners had that got them those wins, and see if we can make a fighting game that can be recognized as one of the greats. Before we try to figure out how to make a fighting game worthy of the Game of the Year title, we need to see the past competition that we're dealing with. The Game Awards have been going on for the past 9 years, which means there's 9 games we need to look at. Funny thing is, there was one trend I noticed when researching for this video, but I'll let you all figure that out as I list them. First, in 2014, our first of many, Dragon Age Inquisition. Then the following year was The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, Overwatch in 2016, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild in 2017, then God of War for PS4 in 2018, Sekiro for 2019, The Last of Us Part 2 in 2020, It Takes Two in 2021, and finally Elden Ring in 2022. Now the trend that I noticed at least was the fact that every winner has no relation to each other. What I mean by this is that the games that won Game of the Year weren't within the same franchise. God of War Ragnarok didn't win Game of the Year, even though the PS4 version did. Same for the Last of Us series. And maybe even the Zelda games, but we'll have to wait for that to be debunked. Now I bring these games up so we can see what we're working with. The level of quality for the years these games came out explain why they all gained the Game of the Year title. What we need to do is look at various points and see if we can make a formula to make a Game of the Year winner. The first point is how recognizable the said IP is. For example, it's much more likely that God of War won in 2018 over Celeste due to its IP already being well known. Now, this doesn't mean it is impossible for a game to win while being a new IP. For example, Overwatch beat out Doom, Uncharted 4, and Titanfall 2 in 2016. Thus proving that a new IP does indeed have a chance to win Game of the Year. Even though it is possible, 6 out of the 9 games that won Game of the Year all were popular IPs, so due to that, I believe that a well-known IP has a higher chance of winning. The second point is that there is single-player content. Once again, Overwatch is the outlier along with It Takes Two, but without those 2 games being accounted for, every other game is either a mainly single-player game or a single-player game with multiplayer content. The third point, which might seem obvious for everyone else, is that AAA companies like Sony and Nintendo have a higher chance of being nominated. Which is obvious because those companies are more well known and have a better reputation in terms of game releases than some indies. Now this isn't me saying that indies are worse, it's just that most casual gamers flock to the big $60 first-person shooter over the $15 RPG game. Point 4 is kind of hard to gauge, especially when your game can release within a week of the polls opening for the show. The fourth point is player retention and community support. Regardless of how big a game is on launch, if it's only talked about within the first 5 days of the game's release and immediately goes radio silent afterwards, chances are it's not winning, let alone being nominated for Game of the Year. Of course, it goes an extra mile if the game has a huge community sharing the game and getting others to talk about and share the game with others. Both things that matter a lot in winning. Point 5 is kind of obvious, but the game has to look good and run good. And I'm only talking about the time that it was released. That's it. I know it seems like a crazy concept, but a game not looking crusty and not looking like it was run on a toaster can help out a lot. Before we try to create a fighting game with all 5 points, we need to look at the past winners of the Fighting Game of the Year award and see which games had the most points. Because let's be real, if the game can't win Fighting Game of the Year, then it likely won't win Game of the Year, or even be nominated. Starting off in 2014, we have Super Smash Bros. For Wii U. When it comes to 3 of the points, it checks them off perfectly, right? Huge community, it's made by a AAA company, and it has multiple well-known IPs. The only point it didn't get was single-player content, unless you count classic mode, but if I'm being honest, that's probably not what casual fans want when it comes to single-player modes. They want a little bit more depth. Now in 2015 and 2016, we have Mortal Kombat X and Street Fighter V, both long-awaited games for their respective series, but one of them ended up falling short. When looking at the points I made, both actually check off a few boxes. Both games were released by AAA companies. and had communities backing them up and are even recognizable IPs. MKX even had a pretty good single player story mode. The only thing that holds it back is the graphics. Not saying that they're terrible at all, it's just that when you look at Bloodborne and The Witcher 3 and other games that even came out before it, they may be a little bit middling. Now, Street Fighter V was bad at launch for multiple reasons, but one of the biggest was the art direction and the amount of fans dropping it due to the quality of the game on release. Makes it only hit about 3 points on the grading system. Like MKX, Injustice 2 in 2017 gets a near perfect score, yet somehow scoring less than MKX due to lack of community support you would see in MKX. And of course, graphics weren't necessarily groundbreaking either. In 2018, we had Dragon Ball FighterZ, another near perfect, if not perfect example of a Game of the Year contender. I would love to give it 5 points all around, but it feels like it only hits 4 due to the single player content not really being interesting anyway, like gameplay wise. Despite that, it was one of the more breathtaking fighting games in recent history graphics wise. 2019, the year that Super Smash Bros. Ultimate released. This should not come as a shocker, but this game is easily a step up from the Wii U version, and is our first 5 out of 5 on the grading scale. Now, World of Light might be controversial to most, we all wanted an actual subspace mode, but for the casual audience, it served as a great way to enjoy the game without the need to be online. And the best thing about it winning all 5 points is that it's the only fighting game in history of the Game Awards to be nominated for Game of the Year. It might not have won, but it is still proof that the 5-point system gets you nominated. Mortal Kombat 11 Ultimate Edition was the winner for 2020. Now, this is a bit controversial. On one hand, most would agree that it deserved to win because it was the best fighting game that released that year. But if you were me that year, you would think that that was total horseshit and Grand Blue Fantasy Versus was the only fighting game that should have won that year. It made sense that they nominated it to pad out the nominations, but for it to actually win is insane to me. Now, if this was the original game and it won, I'd give it a 5 out of 5. But when it comes to looking at things like player base and community support, it feels like cheating to give it a perfect score when the community literally didn't change upon the Ultimate Edition dropping. It's the same fucking game. It's literally the same game. Anyways, Guilty Gear Strive, one of the best looking fighting games of all time, won Game of the Year in 2021. Once again, this game is near perfect, but due to the single player content being damn near non-existent, it makes it a 4 out of 5 on the point scale. Now finally, in 2022, Multiverses dropped. Now, at the time when this game came out, I'd argue a 3 out of 5 only due to the graphics not being as polished as it could have been and the lack of single player content. But when you look at everything that occurred after the fact, the community left in under 6 months, it has to be a 2 out of 5. Now, looking at all these games makes it clear that the bigger the star power and the better the gameplay allows for an almost guaranteed nomination, as long as you get a 5 out of 5 on the point scale. Smash Ultimate is proof that if you follow these points, you can get a fighting game nominated as Game of the Year. Now, when we look at the formulas that we've made, very obvious that a game that can even be nominated for Game of the Year needs to follow those 5 points, at least in terms of fighting games. Smash Ultimate was obviously proof that was like probably the closest that we were ever going to get, right? Now the thing is, in order to make a game with a popular IP, a AAA company, everything else like that we've talked about, it's gonna take a lot of work. And honestly, it feels like there hasn't been many fighting games that have that much great single player content nowadays, and that have that much like in-depth stories and world building and yada yada yada. Like, honestly, I think it's kind of a pipe dream. Except when you look at Street Fighter 6. The elephant in the room is this year's big hit, Street Fighter 6. When you take into account everything, it's an obvious 5 out of 5, which makes it even more confusing why it didn't even get a nomination. There was good single player content, the graphics looked amazing, hell, they even had character customization and a $1 million tournament to celebrate the launch of the game. So where did it go wrong? The obvious answer is that it just wasn't good enough, like in comparison to everything else. The sheer amount of games that came out this year with overwhelming quality made it impossible for Street Fighter 6 to get nominated. And honestly, I knew this would be the outcome from the beginning. All the games that were nominated for Game of the Year are fantastic, and there's still games that weren't even nominated that were viewed as better than Street Fighter 6 to the public. And that's what the secret 6th point is. Who does the Game Awards want to get nominated? When we look at the history of the Game Awards, it should have been made clear to most of us that there are some games that really shouldn't have won some categories over other games. For example, in the same year that Injustice 2 won, Tekken also came out, Tekken 7. In 2016, when Street Fighter 5 came out, KOF 14 released, and Pokken Tournament even released. Honestly, I thought that was a little bit better than Street Fighter 5 at launch, okay? Now, of course, this is all personal opinion, but most of the FGC agreed that when those games came out, there were better options in winning. At the end of the day, whoever pays the Game Awards the most money to win or has the most world premieres at the show will more than likely get nominated and probably win some more awards. And you know what? That's okay, because the Game Awards weren't really made for fighting game players, honestly. Fighting games have a very niche community whether we like it or not. No matter how loud we are, we will always be the minority in the gaming space just due to how demanding fighting games can be. They take commitment, learning, dedication, and so much time. Most casual gamers don't want to spend hours labbing before jumping into a game, and they also don't want to spend $70 on a new fighting game and $30 for all the DLC characters. At the end of the day, the only opinion on what game deserves Game of the Year is our own. Because then at least no one can take that away from us. That's our own personal favorite. Okay, but if we were to theoretically make a fighting game that could win Game of the Year, it would have to look like this. In my head at least, right? A crossover fighting game between the biggest fighting game franchises ever. Tekken, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat. All combining things that make each game unique and great in their own aspect. This game would have a crazy single player story mode, gorgeous graphics, and the best netcode that this industry has had to offer. Top it all off, it'd be free to play. No, okay, honestly, no, that was kind of a stretch, but that'd be sick as fuck for a fighting game to have all of that. And I think that would definitely make people consider that being Game of the Year for like an entire this collaboration of fighting games and just like a celebration of fighting games. That would have to be the game that gets nominated. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you made it to the end, I owe you a steak dinner for real. To be honest, if Street Fighter 6 was released next year or like any time when the competition wasn't so fierce, it'd probably have a good shot at winning. I guess it's all up to Street Fighter 7 now. Or even Project L, maybe. I don't know. Well, with that being the case, have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.